October 21, 2016. Thousands of major websites including Twitter, Netflix, Spotify, Reddit, GitHub, and PayPal began disappearing from the internet simultaneously, not because they were hacked directly, not because of a data breach, but because a silent attack was choking the infrastructure underneath them, causing users around the world to refresh blank pages while engineers scrambled to understand how half the internet could collapse without warning, raising a terrifying question that no one could yet answer. How could so many global platforms fail at the same time? Who was responsible? And why was the attack still spreading? At 7:10 a.m. Eastern Time on October 21, 2016, engineers at Dyn, a major DNS provider based in Manchester, New Hampshire, noticed abnormal traffic flooding their servers, traffic so massive and coordinated that it immediately overwhelmed core systems responsible for translating domain names into IP addresses, effectively making websites unreachable even though they were still online. And while Dyn attempted to mitigate what initially appeared to be a routine distributed denial-of-service attack, the volume kept increasing instead of stabilizing, forcing a chilling realization inside control rooms across the US. This was not normal traffic. This was something engineered. But by whom, using what devices, and how could so much power be generated so early in the morning? Between 9:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on October 21, 2016, the attack escalated into a second wave that knocked out access to services used by hundreds of millions of people across North America and Europe, including news outlets, payment platforms, and communication tools, triggering confusion in financial markets and panic among infrastructure providers who now understood that the internet itself was being targeted at a structural level, not by exploiting software vulnerabilities, but by abusing a system everyone trusted, leaving one question hanging over every emergency call. If this wasn't caused by compromised servers or stolen credentials, then what exactly was being used as the weapon? And if no data centers were breached, if no passwords were stolen, and if no traditional hacking tools were involved, then what powered the largest internet outage in modern history? How were the attack devices controlled? And could the same method still be active right now without anyone noticing? October 22, 2016, by 12:45 p.m. Eastern Time, cybersecurity investigators confirmed that the Dyn attack was being powered not by computers or servers, but by hundreds of thousands of compromised Internet of Things devices including home routers, IP cameras, and digital video recorders. Most of them owned by ordinary people who had no idea their devices were even online-facing, let alone weaponized. And as traffic analysis showed identical behavior patterns across continents, experts reached a disturbing conclusion that shattered assumptions about cyber warfare. This attack wasn't launched from data centers, it was launched from living rooms, bedrooms, and offices worldwide. But how were these devices infected in the first place? Who connected them into a single force? And how long had they been under someone else's control? The answer began to surface weeks earlier on Friday, September 30, 2016, when the source code for a malware strain called Mirai was publicly released on an underground hacking forum, revealing a program designed to scan the internet for IoT devices protected by default usernames and passwords, automatically infect them, and quietly link them into a remotely controlled botnet. A design so simple and effective that within days, multiple independent attackers could build their own armies without advanced skills, raising an alarming question regulators could not yet answer. If the code was now public, how many Mirai variants were already spreading beyond this single attack, and who else was preparing to use them? By the afternoon of October 21, 2016, forensic data showed that many of the devices used in the attack belonged to hospitals, small businesses, and private homes, with owners experiencing no performance issues and receiving no alerts, because Mirai was designed to hide, persist, and quietly obey commands until activated. Meaning the largest internet outage of the decade was powered by people who never clicked a link, downloaded a file, or broke a rule, forcing a deeply unsettling realization. Across the cybersecurity world, If ownership no longer meant control, how many devices were already compromised? How many attacks could be launched at once? And could anyone realistically stop it? And if the malware code was public, the devices were unprotected, and the internet was already saturated with vulnerable hardware, then why did the attacks suddenly stop? Who turned them off? And what mistake did the attacker make that would eventually expose them? So make sure you hit the subscribe button, because here is what makes this story interesting. By October 24, 2016, just 3 days after the DIN outage, federal investigators and private threat intelligence firms began correlating command and control traffic from Mirai-infected devices and noticed a critical flaw. Some attack servers were intermittently reconnecting to infrastructure previously associated with Minecraft server hosting and DDoS for hire services. A crossover that suggested the operator was not a nation-state or military unit, but someone already active in online gaming and underground service markets, raising an uncomfortable question that shifted the entire investigation. Why would a global internet attack point back to gaming communities? And who inside those spaces had both motive and access? By Wednesday, October 26, 2016, analysts observed that the same online alias kept surfacing across multiple forums tied to DDoS services, competitive game server attacks, and traffic routing tools, an alias that had appeared months earlier in disputes involving Minecraft server rivalries, where taking competitors offline translated directly into financial advantage, revealing that Mirai was not originally designed to disrupt the global internet, but to dominate a very specific underground economy, forcing investigators to ask the pivotal question: if Mirai began as a tool for gaming dominance, when did it evolve into a weapon capable of knocking major internet infrastructure offline? Thursday, October 27, 2016, the situation escalated when the Mirai source code release was traced back to a forum account that reused linguistic patterns, timing habits, and technical fingerprints identical to those used in earlier service advertisements, a classic operational security failure that linked the malware author to a real digital identity trail, prompting law enforcement to quietly begin subpoenaing hosting providers, payment processors, and chat platforms, but leaving one critical mystery unanswered: if the creator had already released the code publicly. Were they trying to disappear, or were they confident no one would ever connect the dots? On December 9, 2016, U.S. investigators publicly confirmed that the Mirai botnet had been created and operated by 3 individuals: Perez Ja, Josiah White, and Dalton Norman, all in their early 20s at the time of the attacks, shattering the myth that only governments could wield such power and replacing it with a far more disturbing reality. A small group with laptops and borrowed infrastructure had briefly controlled a significant portion of the internet, leading to the unavoidable question that haunted policymakers: if 3 individuals could do this once, how many others could do it again? And if the attackers were identified, why didn't the internet immediately become safer? What deals were made behind closed doors? And how did Mirai permanently change the way governments, companies, and users think about connected devices? On Friday, January 6, 2017, federal prosecutors quietly confirmed that the creators of the Mirai botnet had begun cooperating with U.S. authorities, a move that immediately shifted the case from a public hunt to sealed courtrooms, because instead of treating the attackers as conventional cybercriminals, the government saw strategic value in their knowledge of botnet construction, DDoS economics, and IoT exploitation, triggering a question that unsettled cybersecurity professionals worldwide. When someone causes global damage, but knows how the weapon works better than anyone else, do you punish them fully or turn them into assets? By the late September 2019, U.S. District Judge Leonie Brinkema sentenced the Mirai authors to 5 years of probation, community service, and restitution payments totaling over $8.6 million, a decision that stunned observers who expected long prison terms, especially given that the DIN attack alone had disrupted major platforms and cost companies millions. Raising a sharp question that still divides opinion: did justice fail the victims? Or did it adapt to a new kind of digital warfare where Knowledge is more valuable than incarceration? By the year 2020, security researchers confirmed that Mirai variants were still actively infecting vulnerable devices, not because the original authors were involved, but because releasing the source code had permanently armed criminals worldwide with a ready-made weapon, proving that some cyber attacks cannot be undone even after the perpetrators are identified and sentenced. Which leads to an uncomfortable reality: if the creators were stopped but the weapon lives on, was the real mistake made in the courtroom, or years earlier when insecure devices were allowed onto the internet unchecked? And if Mirai never truly died, how many modern outages can still trace their roots back to that code? What lessons did governments actually learn? And why do the same vulnerabilities continue to exist today? On Wednesday, December 2016, just 2 months after the DINE outage, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security publicly warned that insecure IoT devices now represented a national-level threat, marking one of the first times consumer gadgets were officially framed as weapons, a shift that quietly forced internet providers, device manufacturers, and cloud companies to reevaluate responsibility for security failures, raising a critical question: when everyday objects become attack infrastructure, who is legally responsible for the damage they cause? Between January 2017 and December 2018, major tech firms including Amazon, Google, and Microsoft began rolling out large-scale DDoS mitigation upgrades, not publicly crediting Mirai but internally acknowledging that traditional defenses were no longer sufficient against IoT-driven traffic floods. While device manufacturers started adding forced password changes and firmware updates, prompting a difficult question: were these changes driven by ethics and safety, or only because Mirai proved that ignoring security now carried real financial consequences? On Friday, December 2020, the United States passed the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act, requiring basic security standards for devices sold to the federal government, a landmark law that addressed many weaknesses Mirai exploited years earlier, yet critics noted it applied only to government purchases, leaving billions of consumer devices untouched. Which raises an unsettling question: can laws that arrive after catastrophe ever truly prevent the next one? By the year 2021, cybersecurity firms documented dozens of Mirai-derived botnets using modified code, stronger encryption, and automated vulnerability scanning, proving that while the original authors were gone, the blueprint had evolved into something more dangerous and decentralized, forcing experts to confront a harsh truth: if code can outlive its creator and improve itself in the wild, have cyberweapons crossed a point of no return? And if Mirai permanently changed how the internet defends itself, what happens when the next attack doesn't announce itself with outages? Who will notice first? And will anyone be willing to shut it down before it becomes global? Between March 2022 and November 2023, multiple record-breaking DDoS attacks exceeding 2.5 terabits per second were quietly mitigated by major cloud providers without public disruption, attacks that security analysts later confirmed were powered largely by IoT-based botnets sharing Mirai's architectural DNA. Meaning the internet was no longer being tested through outages but through endurance, raising the uncomfortable question if the biggest cyber attacks in history can happen without users noticing. How many have already occurred without ever being reported? On Tuesday, January 16, 2024, cybersecurity researchers disclosed that several large-scale botnets had shifted tactics from disruption to reconnaissance, mapping infrastructure, identifying weak points, and then going dormant, a strategic evolution that mirrors military intelligence doctrine rather than criminal chaos. Leading to a chilling question: if the next global cyber attack is designed not to be loud but invisible, will anyone realize it's happening before systems start failing? By mid-2024, analysts openly acknowledged that distinguishing between criminal botnets, hacktivist infrastructure, and state-aligned cyber tools had become nearly impossible, as shared codebases, rented botnets, and reused exploits erased attribution, forcing governments into hesitation because responding to the wrong actor could escalate real-world conflict. Which raises a dangerous question: when no one can confidently identify the attacker, does deterrence still exist? As of February 2025, more than 17 billion internet-connected devices are estimated to be online globally, many still shipped with weak security defaults, quietly expanding the same attack surface Mirai first exploited nearly a decade earlier, creating a reality where the internet's greatest vulnerability is not a single flaw but scale itself. Leading to the final question: have we already accepted a permanently unstable internet as the cost of convenience?